During the filming of Peter Jackson's 1996 film The Frighteners, Universal Pictures was impressed with Jackson's dailies and early visual effects footage. The studio was adamant to work with Jackson on his next project, and in late 1995 offered him the chance to direct a remake of the 1954 film Creature from the Black Lagoon. He turned down the offer, but Universal became aware of Jackson's obsession with King Kong and subsequently offered him the opportunity to direct that remake. The studio did not have to worry about lawsuits concerning the film rights from RKO Pictures, the studio behind the 1933 film, because the King Kong character is held in the public domain. Jackson initially turned down the King Kong offer, but he quickly became disturbed by the fact that someone else would take it over, and Jackson continued and make it into a terrible film. That haunted him, and eventually he said yes to Universal. At the same time, Jackson was working with Harvey Weinstein and Miramax Films to purchase the film rights to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, while 20th Century Fox was trying to hire him for the 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes. Jackson turned down Planet of the Apes, and because Weinstein was taking longer than expected to buy the Lord of the Rings rights, Peter Jackson decided to move forward with his reimagining of the 1933 film in what would become his 2005 film, King Kong.
What's this? It's the script. This is a script? Jack, this is 15 pages.
I know, but they're good. You got 15 good pages there, Carl.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. Connor here with you, and today Chris and I are diving into the 2005 remake of King Kong. And Chris, I'll let you spill yours first on this, on what you remember liking about this film, and if you enjoyed it or not on your most recent rewatch.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I was in that Lord of the Rings generation, so I watched those films religiously. I could probably say half the dialogue from those movies. So after The Lord of the Rings, when Peter Jackson was moving on to do a remake of King Kong next, that was, to me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's a masterpiece incoming. That's just going to be the greatest movie ever. Movie came out when I was 13 years old, kind of right at that age. It's not a perfect movie. It's not a masterpiece, but there's a lot of things in it that are basically perfect. It might not be a perfect mixture, but there's a lot of stuff to enjoy about this movie, just in terms of even the visual effects and the production design and cinematography and all of that, and the action sequences and the creature design work and the design of Skull Island. There's a lot to love about this movie. It's maybe some of the casting choices are a little off, but it is a great overall ensemble, and I like that. I'm a big fan of movies with a lot of characters. This one, maybe we can talk about it, maybe has a few too many, but the worst thing you can say about the movie is it's a little overindulgent, because Peter Jackson's favorite movie growing up and his all-time favorite movie was the original King Kong. So this is a passion project for him. One of those movies he kind of dreamed of making his whole life. He almost made it in the 90s, and then he came back to it. So, if the worst thing you can say about it is that, there was no one around to tell him no and no one to kind of hold him back, that's not the worst thing in the world, that he indulged a little bit too much in every single idea he had. But outside of that, it's just a great monster movie, a great adventure movie. It's not perfect, but it's a really good time. And even now, 20 years later, it holds up. It's still, the visual effects maybe don't impress the way they did 20 years ago, but it's still impressive for 2005. And it's still a visual effects heavy film with a lot of great sequences in it, and a lot of sort of the way the CGI and the effects are lit and staged is still very impressive and very complex. And, you can see how it was essentially the most expensive movie of all time when it was made, and it shows on screen. It's an indulgent movie. It's excessive, but that's kind of what you pay for. But it's a good time. It's not perfect, but it's a heck of a good time.
I 100% agree. I was around the same age as you, roughly about 12. I think I was in sixth grade, about halfway through sixth grade. And I seen the trailer for this, and of course, I didn't know what it was at first. At the beginning, it's like it's Jack Black, and he's like, "I want the cast and crew on the ship within the hour." Blah blah blah. So you get to watching it when it's on TV, and it's like, all right, like what is this? And, it's a Jack Black adventure film, and then as the trailer goes on, it's like, holy hell, this is a King Kong remake. Like, and I absolutely nerded out. I was so excited. I went and seen it in theaters with a buddy of mine. He wanted to go see Harry Potter actually when we got to the theaters, and I looked at him and I
Oh,
said, "Hell no, we're going to see King
oh
Kong.
man,
You can
no.
go see Harry Potter. I'm going to
No,
see King Kong."
for me, and I mean, this might say something about me. For me, that December, I was not seeing Harry Potter. I was seeing the Chronicles of Narnia and King Kong. Those were the movies that I saw in December of '05.
Do not get me wrong. I like the Harry Potter films, but when he said that before, we were talking about it at school because I was talking about King Kong, and then we got to the theater, and he's like, "Are you sure you don't want to go see the Harry Potter film?" Blah blah blah. He was a big fan of the books, and I was like, "You go ahead. I'm going to see King Kong." And
Yeah.
it was crazy because there was a dad next to us with his two younger boys, and the youngest one fell asleep during the time that they hadn't got to the island yet, and
Mhm.
literally slept through the entire rest of the movie. So he
Oh
didn't
my
see
goodness.
anything. It was just like, well, this maybe when this kid grows up a couple years, he'll give it another try.
Yeah, I remember the famous teaser where it's just them sort of in the shallows, and it's a scene that's not even in the theatrical version of the movie. I'm not sure if they put it back in the extended cut or not. I don't remember. Uh, and It's where they're filming on in the shallows, and he's doing, Carl Denham's doing the whole scream, man, scream for your life, and she screams, and then you hear Kong's roar. Like that was like the hook of one of those first teasers, and it's so exciting. And I mean, I remember back in those days, you would try to find the music that they used in trailers, and one of the trailers had a track. There were companies that did music specifically for movie trailers, and the track used in one of the trailers, I think, was called Dethroned, and it was by one of these trailer music companies called Immediate Music or X-Ray Dog or something like that, but it was called Dethroned. And I remember discovering that track and thinking like, wow, what a cool name for a track for a King Kong trailer. So it's just one of those things. Like there's so many things about this movie that were iconic to me. And that and back to Harry Potter, that was the I saw the first three in theaters, but then by the time I turned 13, I was like, all right, I'm not really into Harry Potter anymore. So I eventually watched them all, and Goblet of Fire is a good entry, but there was no way I was seeing Harry Potter when Narnia and King Kong were coming out that December.
Absolutely not. And on my most recent rewatch of this, I hadn't watched this for a while. It's probably been a couple years, and I did watch the extended cut, and I
Okay.
I absolutely love that cut more than the theatrical cut. It is roughly 20 minutes longer, probably, you know, 5 of that is probably credits or so, 15 of it is actual screen time roughly. But I absolutely loved it. I was watching it and I was just amazed, I guess I could say, that of the visual effects like you spoke of, that this film's 20 years old, and these visual effects in this film look better than, still 60% of movies that come out today. And I
Oh
mean,
yeah, there are
clearly
mar-
it
there
was,
are yeah, there are Marvel movies that this movie puts to shame.
yeah, I mean, clearly the budget was for this film was put to very good use. And there's just so much going on the screen. There's so many creatures that they created for this film, and I think Kong looks amazing in this film. And I like that it that this film, it kind of makes it like a softer like love story for Kong. Like he's taking care of the girl, and throughout the movie, like you can see Anne start to like actually like really care about him and feel safe with him and whatnot. Like it's just an all around phenomenal movie. And I mean, I would recommend this to anybody, even being almost 3.5 hours long. Like this is just one of the greats that I grew up with, honestly, to me.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's not a lot of room in the world for, monster movies that are kind of that you would describe as epic. Not epic in terms of like large armies of battles, but just epic in terms of the size and the scope. And at 3 hours and with the journey that it goes on to the island and back to New York, like it's of epic proportions. And giant monster movies maybe aren't best suited for that, but because of that, you don't get a lot of epic super A tier giant monster movies, and this is one of them, and for that alone it's worth watching.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, when I always compare and contrast, like, the remakes for horror movies, anything like that. I always like to look at what they did different or what this and that. And it's like, if you compare this to like the 2014 Americanized Godzilla or something like that, like, I think this film blows that out of the water. And I am a much bigger Godzilla fan than I am Kong, but this film just has so much action and emotion, and you actually get to feel for Kong in this one. And I like the way Peter Jackson did it, even if, again, it is over 3 hours long. I think it's phenomenal. I would have sat through this if it was 4 hours long. I couldn't get enough of this movie when I was younger, and I'm surprised I haven't watched it for the last 2.5 years or so.
Yeah, we'll get into the kind of the balance of the movie and maybe some of the things that it, the pros and the cons a little bit. But because it definitely, it feels like it's a movie that could have been, you know, it when before it came out, for me at least, it felt like it was going to be the biggest movie ever. It felt like it was just going to be like the all-time great. And so maybe my 13-year-old mind had some high expectations coming off of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I thought it was just going to be like this perfect masterpiece that was going to take over the world, and it didn't quite do that. But despite that, it's still a heck of a movie. It's still a damn good movie.
Absolutely. I'll give you some background and information on the film quick. King Kong is a 2005 epic adventure monster film co-written, produced, and directed by Peter Jackson. It is the ninth entry in the King Kong franchise and the second remake of the 1933 film of the same title, the first being the 1976 remake. This film stars Naomi Watts, Jack Black, Adrian Brody, and it is set in 1933, and it follows the story of an ambitious filmmaker who courses his cast and hired ship crew to travel to a mysterious Skull Island. There they encounter prehistoric creatures and a legendary giant gorilla known as Kong, whom they capture and take to New York City. Development for this film began in early 1995 when Universal Pictures approached Jackson to direct the remake of the original 1933 film, but the project stalled in early 1997 as several ape and giant monster related films were under production at the same time, and Jackson planned to direct the Lord of the Rings film series instead. As the first two films in the Rings trilogy became commercially successful, Universal went back to Jackson in early 2003, expressing interest in restoring development in the project, to which Jackson eventually agreed. Filming for King Kong took place in New Zealand from September 2004 to March 2005. It is currently one of the most expensive films ever produced, and its budget climbed $57 million over what it was expected to be. King Kong premiered at New York City on December 5th, 2005, and was theatrically released in Germany and United States on December 14th. The film garnered positive reviews and eventually appeared in several top 10 lists for 2005, and it was praised for special effects, performances, sense of spectacle, and comparison to the 1933 original, though some criticism were raised for its over 3 hour runtime. It was a commercial success and became the fourth highest grossing film in Universal Pictures history at the time and the fifth highest grossing film of 2005. It also generated $100 million in DVD sales upon its home video release in March 2006. It won 3 Academy Awards for Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Visual Effects, and a tie-in video game was released alongside the film, which also became a commercial and critical success.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. The '90s version apparently was a bit more. They talk about how it was a very different movie than what the 2005 version ended up being, and they've said, the people who were working on it and were associated to it said that the best comparison could be that the 1999 Mummy movie starring Brendan Fraser, that was very much the sort of tone and style of what that 90s version of King Kong was. A very sort of Indiana Jones-esque, a little campy, a little bit of humor, but this sort of fun adventure horror kind of visual effects film. And that, obviously after the Lord of the Rings, it became this much more serious, epic kind of top tier sort of a movie. And the film got underway so quickly after the Lord of the Rings was finished. The Return of the King came out in December of 2003, and Peter Jackson sort of barely had enough time to kind of recharge the batteries after that whole thing, and then roll right into King Kong. And I think that might be some of the reasons that the budget escalated a little bit. And I think perhaps on a script level, that might be where some of the long-winded nature comes in. The movie feels like it's maybe, not a totally polished final draft. Maybe with a bit more refining, it's not a 3-hour movie. Maybe things are a bit more expedited. Maybe some of the larger cast of ensemble characters, maybe a few of those get folded together to kind of make some efficiencies. There's some hallmarks in the movie of a little bit of like unpolish in the script department, or maybe the editing and things like that. I always kind of fantasize that, if it had come out in December of 2006, just one more year, that it would have been that kind of perfect masterpiece that I dreamed of. But what we got was still pretty fantastic. And the final note on the strong DVD sales, that is the entire reason why they then went back and were able to fund essentially the extended edition of the movie. The strong response on DVD is how they got the green light to say, okay, here's X amount of millions to go finish those 20 minutes of visual effects heavy work and create that extended cut of the movie to double dip the film on DVD, because those DVD sales were so strong.
Yeah, I don't think I have a bad thing to say about this film. I have very high praise for it. And then being able to play the video game, I was in love with this
Oh,
video game.
yes, that was for many. My older brother became. I was obsessed with the movie. My older brother was obsessed with the video game. I would watch him play it like I was watching the movie, and it really, there are really a lot of reasons why that for a long time was considered the benchmark for video game, for movie video game tie-ins. There's, I think arguably the only other one would be the Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, but that's sort of a prequel to the Pitch Black movie. It's not really an adaptation. This was a direct adaptation, and it was very innovative. It had this element where you could turn off the heads up display, so then you were getting no like ammo counter or anything like that, and you would get the narration of the character saying like only 10 rounds left, or what have you. Like it was these really innovative concepts and ideas for a movie video game tie-in, and a lot of people think very highly of that game.
I actually I got an Xbox One, so I found out that game was backwards compatible, and
Mm,
I got it for like $12 at a GameStop somewhere a couple years ago. I seen it and I was like, absolutely, that is mine now.
nice,
So
nice.
every now
Yeah,
and again, I throw it in and I play the bonus alternate ending to it where you get to save Kong and take him back to his island. So makes
oh,
me feel
nice.
a
That's
little
cool.
better.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because for the longest time, all video game movie tie-ins, all movie tie-in video games were just kind of perceived as being these sort of phoned in, quick made, cash in, just to sell a couple units. They were always quick and cheap, and there are very few that kind of buck that trend. From what I understand, the Van Helsing video game was also a pretty well received one in terms of how it expanded and explained all of the lore and backstory and things of that nature that weren't really touched on in the movie. Like, it was seen as a proper expansion. But King Kong was definitely one that everyone praised.
Absolutely. We found a new popularity for Godzilla and Kong, and all us nerds want is we want a new Godzilla game and a new Kong game or something like that. Besides the newer the Kong, the Rise of Skull Island or whatever it is,
Yeah.
I've read terrible reviews about that, but how about we
Yeah.
get a proper, with all the technology we got, give us a remaster of this 2005 King Kong game with upgraded like graphics and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
give us something, or give us, that Godzilla Destroy All Monsters. Give us that modern video game. Give us a melee fighting game with all of the MonsterVerse characters. Give us something like that.
You would think if they keep making these MonsterVerse movies and like Toho making Godzilla movies, like eventually they would have to give us something on the newer PlayStation or Xbox or something.
It makes too much sense.
It does. So that just means they won't do it.
Yeah.
Why don't I go ahead and get into a trailer for the film? We'll get a plot synopsis rolling and we'll come back with some numbers. I got a bunch of fun facts on this one, and then we'll keep on rolling.
I want the cast and crew on the ship within the hour.
No, Carl, you can't do this.
Tell them the studio pressured us into an early departure.
It's not ethical.
What are they gonna do, sue me? Huh? They can get in line. I'm not gonna let them kill my film.
We have 3 hours to find a new leading lady, or we're finished.
There are thousands of actresses out of work in this city. Somewhere out there is a woman born to play this role. A woman who will journey into the heart of the unknown, towards a fateful meeting that changes everything. I've come into possession of a map. An uncharted island. A place that was thought to exist only in myth.
Wall! There's a wall ahead!
Until now. That's where I'm gonna shoot my picture.
You're feeling uneasy, Anne. The feeling's growing. It's washing over you. Scream, Anne! Scream for your life!
Herb, get the camera.
I'm taking it! Restero! Behind the wall!
What took her, Carl? You saw something.
This film is not yet rated. In theaters Wednesday, December 14th.
In 1933, during the Great Depression, struggling New York City vaudeville performer Ann Darrow is hired by financially troubled filmmaker Carl Denham to star in a film with actor Bruce Baxter. Ann is hesitant to join the picture until she learns her favorite playwright, Jack Driscoll, is the screenwriter. Filming takes place on the SS Venture, a small cargo ship belonging to the Dutch East Indies colony, anchored in Surabaya under Captain Inglehorn. Carl claims the Venture will sail to Singapore, but in truth he intends to film the mysterious Skull Island. Captain Inglehorn reconsiders the voyage, prompted by his crew's speculation of trouble ahead. During the voyage, Anne and Jack fall in love. The Venture receives a radio message informing Inglehorn there is a warrant for Carl's arrest due to his defiance of the studio's orders to cease production, and instructing Inglehorn to divert to Rangoon, but the ship becomes lost in fog and runs aground on Skull Island. Carl and others, including his film crew consisting of cameraman Herb, assistant Preston, and boom operator Mike, explore the island and are attacked by natives who kill Mike and a crewman. Inglehorn rescues Carl's group, but as they all prepare to leave, the natives secretly abduct Anne to offer her as a sacrifice to Kong, a 25-foot-tall ape. Jack notices Anne's disappearance, and the crew returns to the island, but Kong flees with Anne into the jungle. Carl catches a glimpse of Kong and becomes determined to film him. Anne wins Kong over with her juggling and dancing skills and begins to grasp his intelligence and capacity for emotion. Inglehorn organizes a rescue party led by his first mate Hayes and Jack, and accompanied by Carl, Herb, Baxter, and Preston. The party gets caught between a herd of Brontosaurus baxteri and a pack of Utah raptor-like Venatosaurus civiticus hunting them. With Herb and several other men killed in the resulting stampede, Baxter and others return to the ship. The remaining party members continue through the jungle when Kong attacks, making them fall into a ravine where Carl loses his camera. Kong rescues Anne from 3 Tyrannosaurus-like Vistatosaurus Rex, bringing her to his den in the mountains. The remaining rescue party are attacked by giant insects in the ravine, resulting in the death of Hayes and most of the rescue party. But Preston, Carl, Jack, and Hayes' apprentice, Jimmy, are rescued by Baxter and Inglehorn. Jack searches for Anne alone while Carl decides to capture Kong. Jack finds Kong's lair and accidentally awakens him, but escapes with Anne to where the crew is waiting to capture the pursuing Kong. As Anne begs the crew not to harm him, Kong kills several sailors, but is subdued when Carl knocks him out with chloroform. In New York City, around the Christmas season, Carl presents Kong, the Eighth Wonder of the World, on Broadway, starring Baxter and an imprisoned Kong. Anne, who refused to take part in the performance, is played by an anonymous chorus girl. Agitated by the chorus girl not being Anne and flashes from cameras, Kong breaks free from the chains, wrecks the theater, and bursts out into the streets of New York in search of Anne, chasing Jack before encountering her again. The U.S. Army attacks, and Kong tries getting Anne and himself to safety by climbing to the top of the Empire State Building. 6 United States Navy biplanes arrive. Kong downs 3 of them, but is mortally wounded from the plane's gunfire and falls from the building after he dies. As Jack reaches the top of the building to comfort and embrace Anne, civilians, policemen, and soldiers gather around the beast's corpse in the street, one bystander commenting that the airplanes got him. Carl makes his way through the crowd, takes one last look at Kong dead, and before walking away says sadly it wasn't the airplanes, it was Beauty killed the beast.
Absolutely. Great job, my good sir.
Thank you. That was a rough one there going on.
Another
Whenever I came across Kong, I always wanted to say King Kong. So I was like, okay, just say it as it's read. Say it as it's read.
Absolutely. Why don't we go ahead and pop into some numbers quick, and then I will get you some good fun facts that we can conversate about.
Sounds good.
So the 2005 remake of King Kong had a budget of $207 million and a box office return of basically $557 million. So Chris, what is that with our inflation numbers to today?
So that would be like having a $332 million production budget these days, which would be, I guess now that when you talk about In-Game and Avatar and things like that, that probably wouldn't still be the most expensive movie of all time. But I remember at the time, it was very much publicized as being the most expensive film of all time. And that box office result of $556.9 million would be about $894.4 million in modern times. So, that's 20 years of ticket price inflation for you. Adds on, $340 million to the box office result.
Yeah, that's insane. And to be honest, back when I was younger, I thought when I first seen the trailer and whatnot, I also thought this movie was going to be huge. So when I actually looked this up and seen that back in 2005 that it only made 350 million technically. It's like, wow, I thought that was going to be bigger than that. I figured if it had a $200 million budget, I thought this movie would have grossed 800 million back when we were younger. But I mean, it still did well for itself enough to, like you said, and then with VHS sales and eventually DVD sales and the video game, and this movie did just fine with all that included.
Yeah, and the Chronicles of Narnia kind of stole its thunder a little bit because that movie cleared 700 million in the same month. These movies were kind of competing for a lot of that same, in the wake of Lord of the Rings, it was kind of perceived like, oh, December is where you drop a big epic movie. And they were both trying to be that big epic movie that December instead of it just being one Lord of the Rings movie. So they kind of fought over the audiences, and Narnia kind of won out with 700 plus million. And it's a shame because I remember thinking, The Return of the King was the second movie of all time to make a billion. And I remember thinking, oh man, King Kong, that'll make a billion. That'll be the third movie ever to make a billion. It might even make more than Titanic. I was very, very optimistic about how big this movie was going to be when it came out. It just didn't quite hit that mark.
Well, and then also, it didn't come out that month, but it was released November 18th. And the Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire film, that made just under 900 million. So, I mean, King Kong was competing with that, which was a massive success. And then the Chronicles of Narnia, and it still made just over five or just under 560 million. So, I mean, I guess that is a pretty big win for competing with those two very popular films.
Yeah, it's only kind of a disappointment. Like one of the notes you mentioned that it was the fourth highest grossing Universal Studios film of all time at the global box office. It was only kind of a disappointment in quotes relative to the fact that it was coming off of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which Return of the King had just made over a billion, and it had just won a record 11 Oscars, which is a tie for the record. It went 11 for 11. So the expectations for the follow-up, the next movie from Peter Jackson, were sky high, and being the most expensive movie of all time, it was just anticipated that this was going to be one of those, not just a hit, but one of the all-time hits. And when it wasn't that, there was kind of this perception of like, oh, it didn't do well. It's like, no, it did quite well, just not in that sort of elite level.
Yeah, and I mean anybody who's seen this knows, I mean, at least in my opinion, that this is a very elite movie. I mean, if you put those three movies in front of me that we just spoke of, this is going to be the first one I pick to watch. I honestly don't know if I've seen Chronicles of Narnia all the way through. I know I've seen a lot of it, but
It's
I can't
definitely
say.
more of a younger skewing kind of film, sort of like Lord of the Rings for kids a little bit. I would say that out of the three we mentioned, Harry Potter, 4, Narnia, and this, I would say this is the one that I've probably revisited the most in the last 5 to 10 years for sure.
And I mean, I'll show my hand a little bit when it comes to Harry Potter. When my daughter's mom,
There,
she's a massive Harry Potter fan, and I think Goblet of Fire, the one that came out the same year as this, was my favorite one of the bunch. I don't know what it
it,
was, but it just happened to.
it's one of the strongest ones. I agree with that. I'm not the world's biggest Harry Potter fan, but I would say that the fourth one is probably one of the better entries.
See, she would disagree strongly, but at least I got somebody in my corner. I'll give you some more numbers here. This film has a 7.2 out of 10 rating on IMDb, an 84% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 81% rating on Metacritic, and 77% of Google users like this film. So a little low on our Google users. I thought that one might be higher. But Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, I do like that they're at least in the 80s. IMDb is a little low. I would honestly rate this film, I mean, high 80s, low 90s for everything. I absolutely love this one.
Yeah. It's sort of it's interesting because it's kind of, in some ways, I would say it's better than it gets a lot of credit for. Then there are some ways where I'm like, maybe not that it's worse, but I can see what flaws it has. I just don't think that the flaws are enough to kind of ruin it. Is the best version of this movie sitting somewhere in the editing room at about 2 hours and 30, 2 hours and 40 minutes? Maybe, probably. Should some of the first hour where they're on the boat and it's kind of taking its sweet time, could that have maybe been streamlined a bit, and maybe we don't gut as many of the awesome Skull Island sequences from the movie that got gutted, you know? I think arguably, is some of the casting a little wonky, uh like I like Jack Black's given it his all, but it's weird for him to not be an outright comedic performance. Is Adrian Brody like a heroic sort of lead, or is he kind of like, does he come off as a little too twerpy to kind of be like the romantic heroic lead? There's all these debates you could have about like everything's a few degrees off or a few notches from perfect, but I think that the things the movie does well, it does so well that it generally outshines those flaws.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you there. Like you said, it does have some flaws. Some parts of the film run a little long, but with all the monster action and stuff we got going on while they're on Skull Island and whatnot, I think it's 100% worth it. I have two more numbers for you here, and of course, it's our Kong numbers. King Kong is on screen for 41 minutes and 12 seconds, or about just over 20% of the film, with his first appearance at just over an hour and 10 minutes, or about 35% into the film. So, I mean, the extended cut without credits is about 3 hours and 3 hours and 11 minutes long, right between there. So, I mean, 41 minutes of screen time is definitely a lot of King Kong screen time, but we also get like the Triceratops like ambush where they come out. We get the Piranodon like swamp sequence.
I think those two sequences, in my opinion, the Triceratops and the Piranodon, those two sequences, I think are absolutely sequences that should have made the final cut of the movie, and you definitely could have trimmed some of uh the minutes of scenery footage of New York and all of that and whatnot. You definitely could have trimmed elements of this movie to save those 5 or 10 minutes from those two sequences. uh the one scene in the extended version that I thought, like, I like it as a scene, but I don't know how well it works in the movie, is when they think they hear Anne, and then they shoot and they think Anne's been shot, and then it's a dinosaur, and it's not actually Anne. I like the concept of that scene, but I just think like it's a little bit like wonky and a little gimmicky to kind of have. So it's like, you don't need a sequence like that in the movie, but I don't understand what convinced them. The brontosauruses, as it stands in the theatrical cut, are the first time you see the dinosaurs, and that was never what the intention was supposed to be. Because they don't react very, very strongly to seeing dinosaurs for the first time. It's because the characters all met the Triceratops first, and that was always the intention, that was going to be the introduction to the Triceratops, or to the dinosaurs. And so, like, that sequence, I think that's a key sequence. And again, the Piranodon sequence is just, it's an all timer. It's one of the highlights of the movie, and it's only in the extended cut. It's a real shame.
Yeah, and it's a good little portion, and then like they have those little like crab, I don't know exactly what they're called, the little crab monsters that come out of the water, and like they have the stinger at the one end and pinchers at the other, and they're in the game as well. But those things are like creepy, and then you have like the insect pit that they fall into where everybody gets attacked, and there's so many good sequences in this film with like the like monsters and insects and dinosaurs and Kong and stuff that I think they could have cut probably 10 minutes off of the human, or 10-15 minutes off of the human or the character's story, and put those visual effects in the theatrical cut, or
Yeah.
just made the movie 15 minutes shorter. But
Yeah, you streamline the boat stuff and the beginning and end New York stuff. You take some bits and pieces from there, and you could the old famous saying, if you shake a movie, 10 minutes will fall out. Well, a 3 hour movie, you shake it a little bit, you can lose 20 minutes without even noticing it. That's how James Cameron got the final 5 to 10 minutes out of Titanic. Is he was literally going in shot by shot and taking off frames of the beginning and ending of shots. A half a second at the beginning of a shot before the dialogue starts, a half a second of a close up there, a half a second here. He was going through the whole 3 hour movie doing that, just finding those few extra minutes to get the runtime down. It's like, if you were diligent in the editing room, this could have been a much tighter movie, and you could have then had the real estate to include some of those highlight sequences.
Well, and I mean, clearly Peter Jackson is not afraid to make a 2.5, 3 hour movie with
No,
that we know with the Lord
I
of the
mean,
Rings.
the three Lord of the Rings movies and King Kong. It's almost like he decided he had to make it 3 hours. Heck, this movie could be 3 hours. Just juggle it a little bit to where you get to keep some of those great monster sequences in there. You know, so you can still keep it 3. Just have a little bit more of those action moments in there.
Yeah, because the extended cut, I mean, there's not those added 20 minutes are mainly creature stuff or dinosaurs or something, or like we said, the Pteranodon sequence. That's like a 7 or 8 minute sequence in itself. So that's all worth keeping in the film 100%. It adds a lot to it. It's a great little sequence in the film.
Absolutely.
Why don't I jump on to some fun facts and we can get chatting about this one. The first one I have for you is it took 18 months to craft the CGI version of the Empire State Building, and the real actual building was built in 14 months.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite pieces from the making of documentary about how it took longer to make the digital Statue of Liberty than the or it's Empire State Building, sorry, than it took to make the real one. That's always been awesome.
Yeah, there was a lot of work that went into this film, and my next one kind of says that this movie had the most number of visual effects shots at around 2,400. It surpassed the record set by Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, which had 2,200 shots, as well as the previous Lord of the Rings movies. Fellowship of the Ring has 560. The second one is what? The Two Towers?
The Two Towers.
Okay.
You got to watch Lord of the Rings, my friend.
I've seen 2 of them. I just haven't watched them in a long time.
Watch them as a trilogy, as a marathon. Three films, 3 nights.
I don't know if I could handle that. The Two Towers had 800, and Return of the King has 1,488 visual effects shots. So, with having 2,400, this movie was leaps and bounds above other films. I mean, it just barely surpassed the Star Wars film, but 2,400 visual effects shots is a ton.
Yeah, and that does say a little bit though, because I believe that Revenge of the Sith with 21 or 2,200 shots, you said, I think that movie's only about 2 hours and 20 minutes. So this movie does have about 40 minutes on Revenge of the Sith to get another 200 visual effects shots in it. So I mean, per minute, I'm not sure how it would break down, but Revenge of the Sith might have had it beaten. But to put things relative for the listeners, a film like Avengers Age of Ultron, which was 10 years after this movie, had over 3,000 visual effects shots in it. You know, the explosion of the amount of CGI and visual effects and green screen that just made it into the average movie, like it skyrocketed after this kind of era. So, you know, now almost every shot of every movie is a goddamn visual effects shot. And to put it more into perspective, the original Jurassic Park, the amount of shots that have digital effects in them, 65.
90% animatronic.
Yep.
I will not complain about visual effects if they look like this. If they look like something like Sharktopus or something like that, then I'm going to complain and cry about it the whole time.
Yeah, I would. Oh my gosh, I would hate to see the stats for the Avatar movies. That's like all one big visual effect.
When we get to those films, I will make sure I find something about that. We will figure out a number for those.
Love the Avatar movies, unapologetically.
At the very end of the closing credits, the movie is dedicated to the original explorers of Skull Island, followed by the names of the actors and actresses who played major roles in the 1933 original film.
That's fun. That's a nice thing. Yeah, Peter Jackson's a wild hardcore fan of the original movie, so he puts a lot of nods and tributes and winks and references to that original movie and the people who worked on it. Yeah, he owns a couple of the original props from that film. I think he snuck some of them into this movie. I think there's like a staff of one of the natives and one of the gas bombs they use in that movie are somewhere to be found in this movie.
I did not know that. I knew he owned some of the props or stuff from the original film, but I didn't know that they were kind of hidden away in the film.
Yeah, he snuck some pieces into there. And for any Lord of the Rings fans, the Paths of the Dead sequence in Return of the King was originally, it's this rocky ravine canyon kind of thing. It was originally going to be where they were going to have the Brontosaurus stampede in this movie, but after Return of the King, they decided that they needed to change it because it would be too recognizable 2 movies in a row. I would have still liked to keep it, but whatever.
Sir Peter Jackson was paid $20 million to direct this film, the highest salary ever paid to a film director in advance of production. And then Sir Christopher Nolan would later receive the same salary for directing Dunkirk in 2017.
Whew. I mean, well deserved on both parts for sure. You don't make the movie that wins a record, goes 11 for 11 at the Oscars and makes over $1 billion and then get cheaped out on your next movie. Universal wanted to get the GOAT at the time, who was kind of perceived to be Peter Jackson, so Universal, got what they wanted. I mean, Steven Spielberg 3 times for Universal made the biggest movie of all time, Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park. You can tell they were seeking some of that energy again. They wanted to get the biggest movie ever, and then funny enough, after Christopher Nolan was kind of done with Warner Brothers, Universal brought him over for Oppenheimer and is doing his next movie, The Odyssey. So Universal has a way of kind of chasing the greatness,
Absolutely. Kind of picking what they want to do what they want,
Exactly.
The puppet masters.
Yeah. Here's a check. I can write all kinds of zeros on it.
Yeah, what do you want? We want you for this film.
Uh-huh. Or we'll make whatever you want to make.
Right. Here's one that I found this one kind of just blew my mind. Over 2 million feet of film were shot, the equivalent of 370 hours of footage, which is 123 times more or longer than the final cut of the film.
Gosh, to be able to comb through some of those, just think about how many minutes and maybe hours of bloopers and outtakes and gag reels they have. To think about just all of the alternate footage, deleted footage that you could go through and see, it would just be, I think about it for movies like The Lord of the Rings as well. It's like there's probably a treasure trove of material there that just in the archives, and very few, if any, of us will ever get to see it.
Yeah, I mean 370 hours of footage. That's ridiculous. I've never heard of a number like that for a movie.
Yeah, I heard that for the battle at the end of the second Lord of the Rings movie, the Battle of Helm's Deep, I heard that there was something like 24 hours of footage for that battle, something like that. It's like, good lordy.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yep, and it all gets cut down, and who knows what happens to it.
Indeed. It just stuck in a vault somewhere. It's not like you're going to do the 37 disc, 24-hour cut of the movie,
Yeah, no kidding. Put a 12 hours of outtakes at during the credits.
Yeah, exactly.
At around 12 minutes into this film, in the dialogue near the beginning, when Carl Denham mentions that the actress Faye is filming something with RKO and Cooper, the Cooper of whom he speaks is Marion C. Cooper, who produced the original King Kong in 1933, and he produced it with RKO Pictures. On the soundtrack at this point, we hear the original 3-note Kong motif, which was used many times throughout the 1933 film.
Yeah, that's one of those great kind of winking and nodding references that everyone has so much fun with.
Yeah, and these are things that like you and I know, but I specifically picked some of these so that like if people don't know a lot of the history or something and they just happen to click on this episode, that we give them a little background, so when if they watch the film again, they can be like, "Oh, hey, I learned about that."
Yeah, and Fay Ray was originally going to be in the film and make a cameo at the end, and she was going to deliver the line, was beauty killed the beast, but unfortunately she passed away before they ever had a chance to film that scene.
Chris stole one of my fun facts about 2 more down.
Yep, I couldn't resist.
Hey, that is 100% okay. This one, for anybody who knows about Kong or has seen the film, this is kind of common sense. This film takes place in 1933, which is the year that the original King Kong was released.
I kind of like that. That they. I certainly like that they went back to making it a movie crew, because then it gets to kind of be a movie about making a movie in a small way, and I always love that. But also, I just it's just much more of a it makes it seem like much more of a classic adventure, and not the whole like, oh, we're looking for oil and I'm an environmentalist and all that stuff. Like, it just seems like much more of like a pure adventure story. It's a bunch of would be adventurer filmmakers just going to an exotic location to try and film something really, really cool. When I was a kid, I fancied myself an aspiring filmmaker, so I kind of identified with that a little bit.
Trust me, I wanted to go to film school immediately after I seen like Jaws and whatnot. I was like, "Yep,
Hmm.
I want to make movies."
Hmm. Hmm.
Another thing about that, like the film crew, like we get to watch and see like how bad he wants to like succeed and like get out of like he's kind of in a rut with making movies, and like they're writing him off as a failure and stuff. It shows like he's filming scenes while people are getting killed and eaten and stuff. And I like one of the quotes from, I believe it was Lumpy, where one of them get eaten during the Pteranodon attack, and he goes, "Did you get that? Did you?" And it just
And it's almost played like he was testing the camera at the moment and kind of unintentionally captured it. It kind of seemed like it was played a little ambiguous, like he wasn't filming the guy hoping he would get eaten. But I do think that one of the tough spots about this movie is that Jack Black, as an actor, as a comedic actor, everyone really liked him and enjoyed him. And then he's cast in what's generally a pretty serious role. And he kind of is cast as kind of oh, he seems like a well-intentioned guy, but I think they play him in a way where he really does come across as kind of a blinded jerk more often than not. And because it's like Jack Black's natural like comedy, he throws in like sarcasm and jokes, but it kind of makes him seem really kind of like a heartless jerk sometimes. And like he gives the same speech about two different guys, like, he died doing what he believed in, we're gonna donate the proceeds to his wife and kids. And it's like, gosh, does he even realize that he's like reusing the same lines? It's like, it's hard to take it as like being sincere when it seems like it's all kind of like an act. And it's like, I wish that they would have portrayed him a bit more, or at least maybe give him a bit more of an arc where he kind of maybe becomes a genuinely better guy by the end of the journey, instead of kind of being so like, he just seems slimier in this version than in the original iteration.
Yeah, like he's almost willing to do anything to get his film, take it back, and be considered a success instead of having people write him off as a failure. And it ends up with, a bunch of his crew being killed, and then eventually on down the road his camera gets destroyed, and that he realizes almost has no other option but to bring Kong back. And that's
Yeah,
where
I
we
would have
continue with the film.
Yeah, I would have loved for him to be played a bit more like John Hammond from the Jurassic Park movie, just kind of into the wonder and the showmanship and the grandiose, like a bit more well intentioned. I don't know, maybe a bit less like, I'm greedy and I'll let people die to get what I want, kind of a thing. Like, it just would have been nice to see maybe a little bit more of a wholesome take. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of care about your crew a little bit more than you do about your camera.
Yeah, something.
Chris knocked on this a little earlier. The main reason why Peter Jackson set to remake the 1933 classic was because it was his favorite film growing up. So he got his wish at a later age, and again, I think he did a phenomenal job with it.
Yeah, and I mean, he certainly, he cashed that check, so to speak. You make the most successful film trilogy of all time, and a studio comes with bags of money, willing to write a blank check for you to do whatever you want. He gets a King Kong movie where basically everyone's afraid to tell him no. He gets to pretty much do exactly what he wants. And now, for the better or worse of the film, we can debate that. But you can't say that he didn't take the opportunity to do exactly what he wanted to do. So like more power to him.
Absolutely. We touched on this one a little bit earlier as well. The tie-in video game for the Xbox 360, also released in 2005, is a situational adventure game paced in a scene-by-scene cinematic fashion, much in the same way as the feature film. And the game specifically features several scenes and plot elements that were conceived for but never implemented in the theatrical film.
Yeah, it's a heck of a game. Like I said, I would watch my older brother play it like I was watching a movie. It was a very well executed video game.
And back in 2005, we thought those graphics were like top
Oh
notch,
yeah.
phenomenal.
Oh yeah. How are they gonna get better than this? It's just gonna look real,
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone knows, and 20 years later,
This one, anyone who's seen the MonsterVerse films will know this. Kyle Chandler in this film, who plays Bruce Baxter, would again appear alongside King Kong years later in the 2021 film Godzilla vs. Kong.
Yeah, and he gets to be, a rare actor who was in a solo Kong movie, and then a solo Godzilla movie with Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then got to be in Godzilla versus Kong. I think that's great. He was always one of my favorites from this movie. He was always one of my favorite characters. I just like his storyline and his character arc. And it was always one of those things where when he would pop up on other things, I'm like, oh, he's that one guy from King Kong. Like that's just what he became for me.
That is exactly what I knew him from as well. And when I seen him in the trailers for King of the Monsters, I was super excited because I do like him as an actor, and I do, like you said, I like him in this film.
Yeah, he was really good in Super 8 as well, the J.J. Abrams movie. That's another monster movie that was really solid. He was really good in that too.
I have not seen that one, so I might have to check it out with him in it.
Hey, a monster movie fan like yourself,
I know
you would dig it. You would dig it. It's not some earth-shattering masterpiece, but it is a good time. It's a good time.
I will have to check it out. I'm slowly marking ones off my list that.
Yeah, maybe that'll be one for the cast.
Hey, we have nothing but time. Here's one that I kind of liked. I do like Naomi Watts in this film, but Rachel McAdams was considered for the role of Ann Darrow in this film.
Dude, you just broke my heart. I would have loved for Rachel McAdams to be in this movie, especially because something I was gonna say, and this isn't to be ageist or anything like that, but I think Rachel McAdams is about 10 or so years younger than Naomi Watts. And one thing that I was going to say is that it feels like the way the movie's written and presented, it feels like Anne is not meant to be someone who's in her 30s or like mid 30s. Like I think Naomi Watts was like 35, 36 when this film was made. And it feels like she's meant to be, not that Naomi Watts looks old, they play her a little younger, but it feels like it was meant to be someone who was maybe more in their early to mid 20s, which Rachel McAdams would have been perfect for. My gosh, my heart breaks because I feel like that would have been nothing against Naomi Watts. She's great, but I think Rachel McAdams would have been just perfect in this movie.
Absolutely. She's just one of those characters from that I've seen from like The Notebook or the film Southpaw that she's very easy to like in film.
Yeah. And I mean that she did a comedy movie, Game Night, and in the last like 2018, and she's just a very lovable actress. She's very likable. She's just very charming. It's like she would have hit a home run with this movie.
You are probably not wrong.
Yeah, and for the love of the Lord, nothing against Adrian Brody, but cast someone with not as huge of a nose as the main guy. I'm sorry, but like, and I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to whatever. Like that dude, like he's not a classically handsome leading man. Like he's like I have some feelings about why they make the lead the screenwriter. It's like, man, I do miss the original where it's like, oh, your lead is your first mate of the ship, and he's this tough action guy. It's like here they wanted to have Captain Inglehorn be a tough action guy, and they wanted to have his first mate Hayes be a tough action guy, and then they also wanted to have like Lumpy the cook kind of be a tough action guy, and then then kind of make Adrian Brody a little bit of an action guy, but be still kind of sensitive and artistic. And like, I feel like, again, that's one of those things where it's like maybe another draft of the script, they could have finagled this a little bit more effectively to where, maybe the main guy, maybe you get to, maybe it's not like everyone's a cool, tough, awesome, handsome action guy, and then Adrian Brody's like this weird kind of twerpy guy. I don't know. That's just me spitballing.
I 100% get where you're coming from. I like him as an actor. I like what he did for this film, but I easily could have seen somebody else playing.
Like if you like mentioning the Mummy, like if you'd had that, like Brendan Fraser is a type who kind of can be an action guy, but he kind of for the ladies can kind of be that heartthrob. I don't know if any of the ladies were looking at Adrian Brody and like swooning, like I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Who knows who knows.
That is all right. We can let our thoughts run freely here on the podcast.
I think I remember. Oh gosh, I remember my mom will sometimes make these offhand kind of comments and I saw this movie with a bunch of family, and I remember the scene where they kiss on the boat. Like she made this comment. This is the first time we're seeing the movie in the theater. She made the comment of like, his nose is almost touching her ear or something like that. I'm like, it's like, wow. Like when they kiss and his nose is on the side of her face. It's like, good lordy.
I have absolutely no comment.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll laugh.
I got two more fun facts for you. I suppose this one I probably could have put up in our numbers. But King Kong kills 41 people throughout this film, one more than he did in the 1933 King Kong.
Wow, so we get a movie twice as long, and he's only got a one higher kill count. That's just some, he's just not putting in the work he needs to be putting in.
He wasn't going after those natives like he was in the first one.
Yeah. I do think, man, the natives were portrayed quite horror movie style. Peter Jackson has his roots in horror movies, and he went very savage with the natives. I enjoyed that.
I did as well. Kind of instead of making them seem like friendly at first, like they're instantly a threat, and I like that.
I don't love, he does that kind of like, it kind of looks like a cheapo depot horror movie slow motion. He uses it a lot during those sequences, and I don't love that effect. It's kind of, he kind of goes all in with the slow motion a lot in this movie. But outside of that, though, I did think it was a really sort of gnarly and scary portrayal. I had younger cousins with me when we saw this movie, and they were certainly freaked out.
Yeah, not somebody I would want to run into in a dark alley. So I 100% agree with you there.
Yeah, no.
My last one here for you is in 2013, Peter Jackson approached Adam Wingard with an offer to direct a King Kong sequel called Skull Island, written by Simon Barrett and produced by Mary Parent. According to Wingard, the film wasn't made because it was set up at Universal and the King Kong rights somehow ended up at Warner Bros. He would ultimately end up going on to direct Godzilla vs. Kong in 2021 and then Godzilla Kong the New Empire in 2024.
That would have been very interesting. The idea that Peter Jackson would have kind of pitched a Skull Island spin-off sequel to King Kong is quite interesting. But man, I mean, you can tell, based on the sequences in the movie, you can tell that Peter Jackson's kind of heart was on Skull Island with this movie, that's where he was really indulging in the creatures and the action and the adventure. And I can see the appeal of making a movie like a movie entirely set on this film Skull Island. That would have been, I mean, that would be cool. I would still watch that, because this film Skull Island was a character in and of itself, and so that would have been a cool thing to see. Some other adventure, whether it had Kong in it or not, some other adventure of people visiting this island could be really, really cool.
Absolutely. There's just so many things you could do and explore, or you could go off of from this film and add to it, or something. You could do something with the natives and stuff like that. There's, especially with technology nowadays, there's just endless options to like continue movies or do something new.
Yeah, and the Skull Island anime spin-off that they did for the MonsterVerse was a letdown and a half for me personally.
I didn't watch it because I heard bad things. So
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not trying to crap on anyone's hard work or anything, but I watch it and I'm like, if they didn't say, "Hey, this is part of the MonsterVerse," I would not get the real sense that it really was. It had one pretty good episode, but it was just very kind of juvenile. And I'm like, man, if you're tying into these other movies that are a little bit more on that upper PG-13 kind of a level, like I don't want an anime spinoff that feels kind of kiddish, in the way that it's done. I'm just not into that. It just the tone was all wrong for me.
no, I can agree with you there. That's kind of how I felt about the new Kong game they released. I was excited for it until I saw the trailer for it, and I was like, this might not be for me. So
Yeah,
I understand that.
the sad thing with Kong being this kind of weirdly public domain, not public domain kind of characters, I'm pretty sure that things like video game rights can just kind of manifest a little bit, and all kinds of weird deals can be made, and so you can get these random video games like that Kong game that don't really have anything to do with anything, and you just gotta live with it.
That's all right. I will continue to go back to my 2005 copy of the Peter
Yeah.
Jackson's King Kong video game.
Hey man, they do the thing all the time where they call it they remaster the games, they reskin them, where it's like the same exact video game, the same sort of mechanics and engine, but they just put like a new graphics skin over it to update it to modern times. Like you do that with the 2005 King Kong movie or video game, and you would have a lot of people playing that.
That is the only thing I am hoping for, even though I know it's a long shot.
Hey man, it's the 20-year anniversary this year. Who knows? Who knows? Start sending those emails.
we gotta get some people in the group page or something. We gotta sign some petitions for it.
Yeah, yeah. Someone tweet at Peter Jackson. Make this happen.
Well, that is all I have for the fun facts for you. Chris, why don't we go ahead and get into our categories? Who was your favorite character of this 2005 Kong?
So there were a lot of characters to choose from, and I would go with two, but I guess I'll just decide on one. I actually like one of the side characters the most, and it's Captain Inglehorn, just because he's such a hardened badass in this movie compared to the kind of older captain from the original movie. And from what I understand, they'd kind of written the character to be a bit more that way. But then when they cast Thomas Kretschmann as the captain, they kind of refigured it into this more of this like grizzled badass Han Solo captain kind of a role, and I really really like that character. He always seems to show up just when things are at their worst to kick some ass and shoot some people or shoot some bugs, and so I really like I always grew up having an affinity for the character that wasn't the main character but was kind of like the really cool side character. So he fills that role in this movie for me.
Absolutely, and I liked him as a character. I mean, there were a lot. I liked Jack Black's character in this as Carl Denham. I liked Anne. I liked how Lumpy was kind of like he was always looking out for Choi and stuff like that. I liked
Yeah, Lumpy's
Dave,
fun. Lumpy's
Jimmy.
cool.
Like I don't think there's really a bad character in this.
Dude.
There's bad moments for characters,
Yeah,
but
you can't watch this movie and tell me that the actor playing Jimmy doesn't have like Tom Holland energy before Tom Holland was a thing, you know? Like in a parallel universe, like that guy would have blown up and had the same kind of success that Tom Holland had after playing Spider-Man. Like he's got that same kind of like he's probably way older than he's being portrayed as on screen just because he's like a short like baby-faced guy. And it's like it's the same kind of it's like Tom Holland energy, it's like Tom Holland in like his mid 20s almost 30 playing like a high schooler, it's like that dude's got the same kind of energy.
absolutely. It's I mean, and that's why I had trouble picking a character for this film. I struggled and I went back and forth between two, and that was Jack Driscoll. I liked him. I have always liked Adrian Brody. I mean, he wasn't who I would have picked to play one of the characters in like the Predators film, but I liked him in that. I liked him in the movie Splice. I liked him in this. So I mean,
Yeah, I'm a fan of both of those movies as well. Yeah, he's not a traditional choice, and you can kind of tell with this movie that they were kind of doing the thing of like, or at least it feels that way, of the of like, is this a crazy casting choice or is it so crazy it just might work? And then they went with it, and it was maybe a little too crazy to work. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, and I mean, I liked him a lot in this, and I liked Hayes as well. Hayes and Jack were the two that I kind of like went back and forth between because Hayes was just down to earth, and he was always trying to look out for everybody. He was always trying to protect Jimmy and make sure that like he was on the right, like a straight arrow path. And so I like those two a lot. So if I had to pick one, I would go Jack because he's more of a main character. But I wanted to put Hayes in there as like an honorable mention because I thought he was phenomenal in this film as well.
Yeah, Hayes is good too. Hayes is definitely good.
And his death scene because him and Jimmy are they're so close with each other. It's almost like a father and son type of thing between those two. Look, like the way he looks out for Jimmy. That I like the scene where this is in the extended cut that he sees Hayes laying there dead after Kong kind of knocked the log over and kind of tossed him over into the insect pit, and Jimmy takes Hayes's hat and kind of puts it on and kind of
Yeah,
like a way like I'm gonna make you proud type of thing.
yeah, a good passing of the torch kind of a moment. Yeah, that is one of the best. Those two characters are some of the best, more interesting characters in the whole movie. It's a shame that kind of after the island section that you kind of don't really follow up on what happens with old Jimmy, but that's okay, I guess.
Yeah, we got a lot of characters in this that we have to follow because once we get back to New York, we get a handful of characters, and I'm okay with what we got. I mean, we can't follow everyone. Otherwise we would have a 4-hour movie.
Yep.
I'll give you my favorite score for the film, and one of the ones there was two different ones that I found on YouTube. One that had like 21 tracks for this or something, and then another one that had like 80 that where the tracks were cut up into like different, part 1 of this track, 2 of this track, 3 of this
Yeah, and
track.
there were some like alternate versions of some of the tracks and things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
And it's I ended up going with the Empire State Building because it where they're kind of Kong climbs up and him and Ann are sitting there on the edge, and it's just like a very peaceful scene. The sunset is coming up, or the sunrise is coming up, and she's Kong's like she taught him like how to say beautiful in like sign language, so he does that, and she understands that he understands that, and it's just an all around great scene with that, and it's such a like a melodramatic type of feeling, like it's so calming, and then as soon as that track ends, you hear the planes buzz in, and it's like, oh shit, here we go. So that was why I chose that one. It's very calm, but we're getting close to the end.
Yeah. It's a good track. That when this movie does the sort of sad and sweet kind of touching stuff, it does it really well. That's not necessarily everyone's favorite part of the movie, and you can argue if they went a little far with it, but I think it does it well. The track I went with, I kind of had a two-way tie, but I'll pick my 1A and my 1B. So Jawbreaker is the track that I went with just because it accompanies one of the coolest moments of victory for Kong in the movie when he defeats the last V-Rex. And then I also it's another track that I liked. It's really understated. It's not much of a track on its own. It's not a very crazy piece of music in and of itself, but the track Dead Crew Members, which kind of accompanies the insect pit scene. That scene, when I was young, just the way it's portrayed and the way that music feeds in always just kind of made my stomach turn a little bit. You know, you have all these, I never liked insects and bugs and things like that growing up. And so you're in a pit of insects, giant insects that are eating people, and the slug thing is latches onto Lumpy's head and is slowly devouring him, and like the whole thing's just really kind of unnerving. And that music, it's not much of a piece of music in and of itself, but as an underlying track to those visuals, always just like it's slightly disturbing and unnerving, and so it always stuck with me. So Dead Crew Members is another good one, but Jawbreaker's that's the champion right there.
I did think about choosing that Jawbreaker that Jawbreaker soundtrack, and there's a lot of good soundtracks in this film that are just they accompany the scene well. You know, they're some of them are like little just little soft, and the scene where Kong and Ann are in New York and they're on the ice and they're almost like ice skating, but he's clearly sitting down. And like the
Yeah.
music that goes with that scene, I thought was phenomenal as well.
Yeah. You get diabetes from a scene like that, but still too sweet.
What was your favorite quote or most memorable line from the film?
Oh gosh, this is one where I have a problem trying to select one, but I mean,
I got
everything.
a 1A, a 1C.
Everything from like all of the fun movie jargon I love, but like everything from like, I'm someone you can trust, and I'm a movie producer, or I loved the great exchange between Carl and Bruce Baxter, where he says, "I need you in the shot, or people will say they're fake," and he goes, "Nobody's going to think these are fake," and but I think I went like, I also, I'm going for all of the comedic lines here. I love when he's talking to Jack and he goes, "This is 15 pages." He says, "Yeah, but they're good. You have 15 good pages there." I took film classes and video classes and stuff when I was in high school, and I would always be the one who would write everything that we would do, all the little shorts or skits or whatever. So I was always the writer of the group, and so I always like that line of like, "This is just 15 pages." Like, yeah, but there are 15 good pages there. So yeah, so I mean, I love all of that dialogue. You could put that all under one umbrella, and it's all my favorite.
Absolutely, those are some good ones, and I mean, we get a lot of good lines in this film. I ended up going with one from Hayes where him and Jimmy are talking, and he's like, Jimmy asks him, he's like, "It's not an adventure story, is it, Mr. Hayes?" And he's like, "No, Jimmy, it's not." And a little bit later on, just a few seconds pass, and Hayes says, "We could not understand because we were too far, and could not remember because we were traveling in the night of first ages, of those ages that are gone, leaving hardly a sign, and no memories. We are accustomed to look upon the shackled form of a conquered monster, but there you could look at a thing monstrous and free." And it's such awesome foreshadowing for what's going to happen to Kong. Like, they see him on the island, and again, he's monstrous and free. And then when they bring him back to New York, he's shackled and in chains, and they kind of have like, per se, like conquered the beast. Like, I thought that line was phenomenal foreshadowing if you like caught it and listened to it closely.
Yeah, it's excellent stuff there, and I've also again, to bring back my umbrella of lines that I enjoyed. I love when Carl Denham says monsters are for B movies, almost commenting on the movie itself. That it's like, this is a monster movie, and this is a very, very A movie, and they say monsters are for B movies. I love stuff like that. But yeah, that's a great that quotation there that Hayes makes is a great piece of commentary on the movie as a whole, and I've always enjoyed that as well.
Absolutely. That's something I didn't pay attention to when I was younger, was a quote or something like that. And then I watched it a couple years ago, and I looked up, like, okay, like what does he mean by that? Because it was such a good quote that it got my mind going. So like I looked it up, like what they meant and stuff like that, and I kind of read into it like what the director meant on that quote, and he meant like how awe-inspiring it was for the characters in the film to see Kong in his natural habitat, and again, like how later on they see him shackled and chained in New York. And then we started doing this podcast, and as soon as I knew that we were doing this film, I was like, I know what my favorite line is going to be, and I don't even have to
Yeah,
watch the movie.
yeah, that's the one. Yep, that's the one. You mean it wasn't? It was you. It wasn't the line. Just a dumb animal didn't know nothing. You didn't love that line.
Not at all. I wanted to
Yeah.
punch that guy when I was in
What a
theaters.
yeah, what a freaking jerk. Oh man, that line just cuts deep for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I did like the guy who came up and asked, like, why did he climb up there and get himself cornered?
Mhm,
But the
mhm.
reply that you just spoke of is,
Yeah.
yeah, that got my blood boiling a little bit the
King
first time I seen
King douchebag.
it. Yep. All right, you went first for quote. I will give you my favorite scene, and I don't even think this is There's plenty of fun scenes to talk about, but I don't even think this is a question. It's King Kong versus against the Vistatosaurus Rexes, because that is
Yeah.
just gold.
Yeah, bingo. Ditto and bingo.
That is just, in the original, you got one that he's fighting, and then a couple other little like snake creatures and stuff later on in the film. And then in the 76 film, you have what I found to be was a large boa constrictor. And then you come to this one, and you see the triceratops and other things like that are on this island. So then when you get to the V-Rex scene, you're like, okay, like what are we in for? And then you see one kind of battling or testing Kong, like looking at him face to face. And then another one shows up and another one shows up, and it's just like, all right, I'm ready to see how he dispatches of these guys, and he gets rid of them phenomenally with crushing one of their heads with a rock. And that scene is just, it's 10 minutes of absolute shut your brain off and have the most fun you can have in this film.
It's what the kids these days call peak cinema. And
Absolutely.
and it's excellent. Again, as a 13-year-old who loved monster movies and special effects sequences, King Kong versus the three V Rexes at that time was like one of the most spectacular fight scenes and displays of visual effects that I think I'd ever seen. Just incredible. The lighting on the characters and the choreography and everything, and just the lengthy duration of it. Peter Jackson really squeezes the lemon on the whole fight sequence, and you can't say you don't get your money's worth out of that sequence. So I loved it, and I love the whole different tone that it brings, because after he's kind of taken on all three of them, when you have that moment where there's only one left and he drops in, you're very much like, oh, this is a formality at this point. Like Kong one-on-one is gonna wreck this thing, and he does, and so it's fantastic.
Yeah, I love the part when he smashes that other V-Rex's head. He's smashing it against the rock, or like the rock wall, and you see Anne drop down, and you see the V-Rex kind of looking at her, like almost like stalking her and
Hmm.
walking towards her. And you see Kong drop down, and you see Anne kind of look at him in like amazement. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
she looks back at the V-Rex, and she slowly starts to back into Kong, like, yeah, I know who I'm siding with on this one.
Exactly. He's got me. Yep. Uh, yeah, it's an incredible sequence. Did you hear the behind the scenes stuff that the perception of the filmmakers was that was a father, mother, and adolescent V Rex? It was like a family that from their perspective had history with Kong. Like he'd encountered them more than a few times before, and this was kind of like the big final battle, I suppose.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah. It changes my whole perspective on it, because like he wipes out their whole bloodline, like
This King Kong is top tier badass in this
I'm
film.
coming for you, I'm coming for your mama, I'm coming for your papa. Like
Yeah, there's so much we can like cherish and like talk about this film because it's so great that T from that T or sorry from the V-Rex fight, and then we go straight into like the insect pit, and we get another amazing visual effects sequence, and like there's like that what is it, roughly like 15-17 minutes of film right there are is better than a lot of movies entirety out there.
I will agree with that. You take just the Skull Island stuff of this movie, and it's almost this awesome movie within itself. Just the you could start at the arrival at Skull Island and just watch until they capture Kong, and that in of itself is more satisfying than many movies that get made these days.
Them capturing Kong in this film absolutely irritates me and gets my blood boiling.
Yeah, it's weird because to me it's almost the way it's executed is almost more gut wrenching than the way they execute the Empire State Building scene, and it's almost like they they shoot their shot a little early a little bit, like they fire off the gun like on all the ways that they could kind of lean into the sort of emotional kind of manipulation of it all, and they do it all with this capture scene. And so then when they get to the Empire State Building scene, it's not quite as sort of like heartbreaking almost. That's just my perspective.
That Empire State Building scene still when the planes kind of when Kong's kind of you can see him fading, and they come and they shoot him from behind and kind of like
Yeah.
finish off
Yeah.
the job per se, like that part still there pisses me off and kind of puts a little tear in my eye. It doesn't get me crying, but it definitely is
Yeah,
like
I'm
damn.
yeah, and animal cruelty is a tough thing for me to deal with, and when I and monsters kind of teeter the line, but when I see movies where it seems like the animals are like actively distressed and being sort of hurt and abused, it always gets me in a different way because like I always say this, but it's like animals don't understand. Like they don't understand like the nature of like what's happening to them or why they're being attacked and killed or whatnot. Like to them they're just like feeling pain and distressed. And like that's just hard for me to kind of watch and take in as a viewer. And it's like Kong's a little smarter than the average bear, but it's still just sort of this thing where it's like he's in this totally foreign world to him and just being killed by these things that he doesn't understand what's going on or why, and it is sad.
So what hit you more? What kind of hit you harder as a scene then? Like, would it be the over the top like 76 version where like Dwan is like over the top crying and screaming, and like the
uh
helicopters are just being brutal, or is it like this
the
one where it's a little slower and more emotional?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that in terms of like looking at it from like the animal cruelty side, I think the brutality of the 70s one, it's almost like it almost becomes hard to watch. Like it almost does feel like animal slaughter, Like, and I'm not some PETA person who's like all fighting for an animal right. Like I'm not some hippy dippy like that, but it's like seeing him just like, they're blasting him, and you're just seeing the blood splurting everywhere. It just feels like it feels like a bad ending to like a bullfight or something where it's like they're like stabbing the bull with arrows and doing all this kind of stuff. Like it feels kind of slaughtery, kind of like gross almost. This is a much more of like an emotional take, so it's kind of hard. Like I'd say the 76 one is more of like a stomach turning kind of a thing. Like, it just feels like you're watching something kind of wrong. And this one's more of just like a kind of a tragedy kind of a vibe, I guess.
Yeah, that's another one of those scenes where once Kong falls, like he finally dies and slips off the Empire State Building. That's another scene that I go to for like where the music in this film is like peak, as he slow motion falls, and like you see the planes that are left that he didn't destroy, they kind of sail past or fly past the camera. And I think that is another example of just Peter Jackson being a phenomenal director.
Yeah, and he has a cameo as one of those pilots as well, one of the people in the planes.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, he's well, he became Thin Peter Jackson for this movie, so he's in there as one of them, but they're all wearing like the headgear and the stuff, but he's one of them for sure. That's him, and I think one of the producers or a couple of the producers, like that's all their cameos is some of those characters.
Next time I watch it, I will have to take a peek.
Yeah, I don't know if he gets like a dramatic close up or anything like that, but he's one of them. It's a fun little thing. He wanted to be part of the team that actually got to kill Kong. You know. Oh man, what was I gonna say? I don't remember. Yeah, but this movie also has the good taste to not do the whole like Kong's gonna explode on impact when he hits the pavement thing. You know, like they go a bit more theatrical and symbolic with it, which we can all appreciate.
Yeah, there's I absolutely love this film. I hold this film in very high regard, and I am like I said, I am shocked it took me so long to watch this again. But as soon as our voters on our Facebook page voted for us to do this franchise, I was like, God, I can't wait to get to the '76 Kong and the 2005 Kong.
Yeah, if there were an Oscars show for exclusively giant monster movies, it would pretty much be this and Godzilla -1 competing for most of the best awards. It would be these two for Best Picture probably. I think. You know, I lean towards -1, but that's probably just my Godzilla bias shining through.
Godzilla bias and about an hour shorter, a little over an hour.
Yeah,
shorter.
Hey, that always means something too. That always means something as well.
All right, well, that's all we have for our category. So, Chris, what did you think of the design of Kong in this film?
That I've been waiting all night for that question. It's a great design. The only kind of quibbles you can have with it is that, and they intentionally did this, so I understand it. Is they wanted it to be very realistic. He's just a oversized silverback gorilla. That is fine. That's a perfectly good take. It makes it seem very realistic. It makes the visual effects work very impressive. But it does, King Kong isn't just a gorilla. He's always been also a bit of a monster too. And so the one thing I don't love about it is that they just kind of made him a straight up gorilla. I like my King Kong to be a little bit of a monster too. Just like Godzilla isn't just a straight up lizard or dinosaur. He's a unique creature of his own, and I kind of like the idea of Kong being a unique creature of its own. The idea that you could take a still shot of King Kong from this movie and people would just be who weren't familiar would just say, "Oh, that's a gorilla." Like I kind of like the idea of the monster being unique enough that you would know that King Kong stands out from just being a gorilla. That's all. That's not the worst thing. It's still a great design and the visual effects are still amazing. That's just a minor quibble.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like that they kind of did a little bit different in this film and actually made him like like a silverback gorilla. I do prefer my Kong to be standing on 2 feet and not hunched over, but I'll let that slide for this film because I do like the way he moves. And I do want to give like props and like
praise.
Yes, thank you. I do want to give praise to Andy Serkis for like the motion capture for this film because he did phenomenal with the motion capture, with the Kong being able to like express emotion and everything in this film is just fine and dandy. It's wonderful in this film to me, and I absolutely like this Kong. I think it's a step up clearly from the 33 film, but I mean there was a lot that went into that 33 film, and it's no disrespect to that, but I just think in this film for what they were going for, I think Kong looks amazing, and I love how he portrays emotion through his face and his eyes and everything that Andy Serkis did.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy Serkis is perpetually underrated for being such a pioneer of this type of performance capture acting. It's such a shame that he kind of wasn't. He's not really given the praise he deserves. In certain circles he is, but generally speaking, he's not given the praise he's deserved. and he kills it as Kong. Just as he killed it as Gollum in Lord of the Rings and Caesar in the Apes movies. He's fantastic, and it's a you know and it's certainly, these were kind of the golden age of CGI, where every year or two you had a new CGI character who was raising the bar on how realistic a digital effect could look. From 1999 to 2006, you went from Jar Jar Binks to Gollum to King Kong to Davy Jones, and it just felt like the bar was consistently being raised every time out. And in the last 10, 15 years, outside of maybe the Avatar movies and some of the Planet of the Apes movies, it seems like Hollywood is kind of just cool with kind of sitting in neutral and just having CGI meet a general kind of standard. Everyone's kind of just aiming for a B plus. No one's really going for that A plus, take it to the next level anymore, unless your name is James Cameron, I guess. So it's kind of a shame, because these were kind of the golden eras where it felt like every other year there was someone trying to one up and raise the bar on how realistic and impressive computer effects could get. And then it just seemed like Hollywood kind of stopped after Avatar. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we can only say and praise this film so much, because they led the way. That this film, for being 20 years old this year, looks phenomenal. There's nothing else I can say about it in my mind. And like I said, I think everything in this film holds up for special effects wise still today.
Yeah, there are a number of close-ups of Kong and shots of Kong that still look quite phenomenal. Some close-ups of his eyes, some of the close-ups of the hands, and even just some of the right sized shots of him, in full body or medium shot. Or there's a great shot where Anne's approaching him, and he does this kind of look over his shoulder and looks away. And even that shot, like, it looks phenomenal today. It still impresses. And so, some of it maybe, some of the composite work during the Brontosaurus stampede of the humans and stuff, sure, you can say what you want about that, but Kong is a brilliant CGI creation.
Absolutely. So, I mean, do we even need to go into final thoughts on this film?
Now we've been spouting off final thoughts on this movie all night.
Absolutely. But for me,
We're an hour and a half in, so we've reached the halfway mark of this 3-hour episode of Chills and Thrills. It's time for the intermission. Switch over to the second disc.
pop it in your VHS player and we'll be
Yeah.
back. No.
Yeah, go make some popcorn. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But no, I mean, when it comes to the 2005 King Kong, I mean, I am so glad I got to see this in theaters. I'm glad that I still have the game that goes, like, ties in with this film. I if they ever re-release this in theaters, which who knows, they might, I will definitely go see it. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite, like, monster movies or Kong movies, and it's one of the ones that I forgot how good it was because I haven't watched it in a couple years, and that is probably all because it's such a long film. But I 100%, as soon as I popped it in, they got onto the ship, they arrived at the island. I was in tune. There was nothing else that my eyes were locked on the screen from the time I put it in, because I remembered how much I liked this film. And I just think it's a blast. I think anyone should give this a watch, whether you're a Kong fan, a movie fan, no matter what. This deserves a watch from everyone.
Yeah, and it is the 2025 will be the 20th anniversary of this movie. So if we can't get some kind of mini re-release, maybe an IMAX reissue or something for flashback cinema or something. If we can't get anything like that, maybe they can at least give us some kind of cool 20th anniversary 4K special edition, this, that, or the other thing for us to kind of pick up and put on the shelf. Maybe they can give us something like that.
I would be okay with that because I have the collector's edition Blu-ray, so I would be 100% for a 4K.
Yeah. I mean, it does exist on 4K, but I mean, maybe there's something cool and special and new they could do for the 20th anniversary. Who knows?
Absolutely. Include like some new movie art or poster art or something like some of the Shout Factory does or something every now and
Yeah,
again.
or some of the Arrow Video collector sets. Arrow Video knocks it out of the park. So maybe we can get something like that. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see. I'm sure they'll. I mean, I hope they will monetize it in some fashion.
Absolutely, and I will be ready for it with my debit card in hand.
Yeah, maybe Universal could get off their bums and give us a 4K disc remaster of their version of King Kong versus Godzilla from the 60s. How about that? That would be nice.
I don't think they listen to us. They're probably not going to hear us.
No, they're like, what did you say?
But yeah, clearly a high praise and a high recommend from both Chris and I, which this was a standalone Kong film, as we would not see him on the big screen again until 2017 when the Monsterverse would release their second entry with Kong Skull Island, released on March 10th, 2017. And that we will be looking at and taking a dive into on our next episode. And I am a huge fan of the Monsterverse and what they have been doing. So I can't wait to dive into that since we already did all the Godzilla and the Godzilla and Kong films. We have one left for the Monsterverse, and it is that Kong Skull Island. But no, as always, Chris, I have to say thank you for joining me. This was by far our longest Kong episode and by far our longest King Kong movie. So I appreciate you joining me with this one because this is fun, and I can't wait to look at Skull Island with you because I like that one a lot as well for a modern day Kong film.
Yep, always a pleasure. This King Kong episode is officially longer than some of the King Kong movies themselves, and maybe if we sell enough copies on DVD, we can have enough money to do the extended edition of this King Kong episode.
We'll give you all the bloopers you want.
Yeah, just wait till you hear all those scenes that we talked about that got cut out of this version of the podcast.
Oh man, it is always a good time here at Chills and Thrills. But no, I'll say thank you again. I'll thank anyone who's out there listening. If you haven't seen Kong Skull Island, your homework for this week is to go home and watch it and then come back and listen to me and Chris talk about it for an hour and a half next week.
Exactly.
All right, but again, Chris, thank you. Thank anyone who's listening. And
thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Of course, I couldn't do it without you. So, again, Kong Skull Island next week, but until next time.
We could not understand because we were too far, and could not remember because we were traveling in the night of first ages, and those ages that are gone, leaving hardly a sign and no memories. We are accustomed to look upon the shackled form of a conquered monster. But there you could look at a thing monstrous, free,